Alright, hi everyone. This is Metasploit for penetration testing. This is week 1 of 2. We're going to go through a Metasploit overview this week, and next week we're going to run through a fake penetration test with a bunch of virtual machines and use our Metasploit to run our penetration test. So, I'm Georgia. Hi. And one apology, for some reason it won't let me, instead of extending the display, it won't let me have it on the same thing. So I actually can't see anything here. So when I do demos, I will try not to be like this, but I might be a little bit. So I'll do my best and try and fix it. So before I begin, acknowledgements. The Metasploit team for writing this cool tool that brought us here today. Offensive Security and the Metasploit Unleashed team. They actually wrote a course called, oddly enough, Metasploit Unleashed that was kind of the basis for this course. So a lot of props to them. And Hackers for Charity, they are a really cool organization, hence the iHack charities on Darren as well as me. And check out the website. It's actually not what it sounds like. It's actually a charity organization that does a lot of good in Africa. So definitely check that out. And if you like this, on top of contributing to the Brain Tank, consider contributing to Hackers for Charity. Also thanks to David Kennedy, a good friend who wrote a book recently on Metasploit, which made writing this class a lot easier. So I could just use the book, so thanks to him. Also thanks to DC401 and the Brain Tank for giving us this space to do this. And special thanks to Darren, because if it wasn't for him, then I never would have come to Rhode Island.
Sorry.
So agenda for today, we're basically just going to go through some Metasploit basics. We're going to do some terminology, a brief introduction to pen testing. If any of you have experience with that, it will be kind of a refresher. How Metasploit works and interacting with Metasploit. And then we'll go into the basics of using Metasploit to do some exploitation. So we already know of a vulnerability. We're not going to go through the whole process this week. We're going to do that next week. But if we know of a vulnerability, how do we use Metasploit to exploit it? That's what we're going to go through. And then after we have an exploit that worked and we have a session, we're going to go through and look at Meterpreter, which is basically a command shell that's part of Meterpreter that has some extra features on top of just what you would find on your command shells on your Windows machines. That's the agenda for today. Okay, so what's in the lab? These are the machines you can attack throughout the course at any time. If you have prior experience, you can go ahead and start attacking stuff if you want to move further. But by the end of this class today, you'll know at least one way you can attack both of these machines and get a session with Metasploit. So these are live now. These are the IPs. There's a Windows XP Service Pack 2 machine with the IP address of 192.168.10.122. And then there's Ubuntu Linux 8.04, which is the Metasploitable disk that is a live CD, well, a VM, I guess. A VM that's actually made by the Metasploit team for demonstrating Metasploit. So that is at IP address 192.168.10.119, I believe. Somehow that sounds wrong. But
They're both reachable.
They're both reachable? Okay. So I believe those are the correct addresses for those. And so at any time if you want to start attacking them, but we will go through it in the class, then by the end you should be able to do it. So those are in scope to attack. Please don't attack your peers. Wow, sounds like something broke over there. So, yeah, but this is hands-on if you want it to be, as hands-on as you want to, so you are welcome to actually use live attacks against these hosts. So, what is penetration testing? Basically, you can think of penetration testing as a get-out-of-jail-free card for hacking. Like, if I went out on the internet and started attacking a bunch of systems, I could probably get in trouble. But actually, as a pen tester, that's what I do every day. I go out on the internet and attack a bunch of systems, and I don't get in trouble. I actually get paid. So, it's actually a simulation of a real attack. I pretend to be an attacker who, in some cases, knows nothing about the network, in some cases knows a lot to begin with, and I try and find as many vulnerabilities as possible and exploit the systems as much as possible. And I go back to the company and I say, here's how you're vulnerable, and this is what you should do to patch it. So then if a real attacker came in who was malicious, then they wouldn't be able to find any vulnerabilities because I had already helped them patch them all. So it's a pretty big business. It's a lot of fun. if any of you are interested in getting into it, definitely this metasploit class is a good start. So what is metasploit? Why are we all here? It's an exploitation framework. It basically streamlines the process of exploitation. So basically, you would think that when you had to exploit a system, you go out to the internet, you found a vulnerability, like you ran a vulnerability scanner and it said CVE number 2010 number 006. What does that mean? So you'd have to go out to the internet and research it and try and find some exploit code and wonder who wrote it and what sort of scary nonsense they actually put in it, and will it work on this system? Was it written for a different system? Do I have to port it? So it was actually a kind of a hard process. So the idea with Metasploit was to streamline this process and make it so that you don't actually have to go out to the internet and look for exploit code. It actually is a group of exploits together for multiple platforms with exploit code already written in the framework. It's all Ruby based, so if you don't know Ruby, which I don't think very many people know Ruby until they decide they want to work on Metasploit. So it's not hard to interact with if you don't know Ruby, but if you actually want to develop on this at some point, and we won't cover in this class exploit development, but in longer classes I've done on this, you can actually, it's not very hard to move into writing exploits in Ruby, even if you don't know it. The original version was written in Perl, but now it's all Ruby based, and I do believe I have heard that it's the biggest Ruby project in terms of just one thing. Rosetta Stone, I suppose, is technically bigger in terms of lines of code, but it's just one module. It would be Metasploit is the biggest, so cool piece of trivia. It's also modular, so you can add a module yourself. As people do this all the time, everybody contributes to Metasploit in some way. It's like the cool thing to do. So you think of, I want to port this exploit into Metasploit, or I want to do this auxiliary module into Metasploit, and then you write it in Ruby and send it in. And so all sorts of people have contributed to this framework. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you want to add something. So it's a group of a lot of things. I have a few examples here: exploits, payloads, auxiliaries, and more. As we'll see next week, there's a lot of things you can do with Metasploit, and we won't even cover everything. So some terminology before we go. I've thrown out a few words that you may not have been familiar with. Exploit. That's the vector for penetrating the system. If you have a vulnerability, you would use an exploit to either get a shell on the system or run a command or bring it down or whatever. But that would be the exploit. The payload is also known as the shell code. That's what you want the exploit to do. After you've successfully exploited a system, it's not really any good to you unless you have it do something, like give you a command shell or bring down the machine again, or just run a single command. So that's the payload, is what actually executes the instructions you want. And kind of hot in here, yeah? Encoders are what actually encode or mangle the payload. So if I just had a raw payload, it might not run on whatever system I was trying to run it on. So you need to encode it. And if you're trying to get past antivirus, mangling the payload can help you get past some antivirus stuff too. Because sometimes you will see antivirus find this stuff because they add this into a signature. Also, there's auxiliary modules. And this is any module basically that isn't an exploit. So we'll see things next week like port scanners, vulnerability scanners, all sorts of things there. And a session, that's the big one that's kind of just Metasploit, whereas you don't really hear session used too much in penetration testing in general unless it's Metasploit. Session is a connection from a successful exploit. If I exploit a system and tell it to give me a shell, then I have a session. So I can then connect back to that other machine that I've exploited and run commands on it. So Metasploit interfaces. So what good is Metasploit if we can't talk to it? So the main one we're going to use is the Metasploit console, MSF console. There's also a command line interface, which we will look at briefly. But most of your work and most of my work, I usually use the console. I think most people do, unless you're going to do a lot of scripting, in which case the command line interface is good for scripting. There used to be a web interface. There used to be a GUI, but they've both been discontinued. And the GUI has kind of been replaced by professional tools that cost money called Metasploit Pro and Metasploit Express. Metasploit was originally entirely an open source free framework, and then it was bought by a company called Rapid7, who has kept, luckily, the open source free framework open, which is what we'll be using, but they also provide professional tools with some extra interfaces and professional support, and that's Pro and Express. And there's also a new tool that came out just a few months ago, well, I guess not a few months ago anymore, but less than a year ago, by a friend of mine named Raphael Mudge. It's called Armitage, and it's a really awesome GUI for Metasploit. He did a really great job with it. If you get around to it, you should definitely go check it out. His website is fastandeasyhacking.com, but if you just look up Armitage for Metasploit, you should be able to find it. It's a really good GUI for the framework that he just made completely on spec, and it has taken off. So again, Metasploit, you can really think of it as a way to streamline your exploitation. So in a traditional pen test, I found a vulnerability. I want to go out and I try and find a public exploit. I try and find one that'll work for the system I'm using, but chances are there's not going to be a public proof of concept for everything. But say I find one that is for the right system. Say I want to exploit Windows XP Service Pack 2. I go out to the internet and I find the right exploit that I need. So it might not be the right offsets and return address. If it's for XP Service Pack 2, that should already be in place. This is a little too advanced for all of this, but God, it is so hot. It is not just me. You guys are just as hot as I am. God. So anyway, so we found a public exploit online, and we need to be able to make it work on our specific system, and it's just a proof of concept. So the shellcode that's going to be in it, if anything, and again the shellcode is what we want the exploit to do to the system after we've exploited it, could be anything. And if it's something like a shell, it's going to have IP addresses already hard-coded in it. So we're definitely going to have to replace that stuff. And do we want to write shellcode ourselves? That sounds kind of hard. So it actually can be quite a long, drawn-out process, even for an exploit that there's publicly available proof-of-concept code to try and make it work in a pen test, to take it from off the internet and turn it into what we need, even if it is something that it legitimately does work. There's a lot of work that would have to be done. So Metasploit was kind of put in place to make that easy. So with Metasploit, we found the same vulnerability. So we look up on the internet and we see that there's a Metasploit module as well as proof of concept code. So we put up our Metasploit and we load that module. And then we select our target operating system, Windows XP Service Pack 2. And then Metasploit will know from its magic in the ether exactly what it needs to do in order to make this exploit work on that system. We don't have to look up anything. We don't have to make a virtual machine of Windows XP Service Pack 2 and find return addresses. Metasploit already knows all that stuff for us. And we set our IP addresses, and it'll make all the shellcode for us. We tell it what we want it to do. If we want a payload that will return a reverse shell to us, we select that, and that with our IP addresses will make the shellcode for us, put it in the exploit so everything lines up nicely. Why did we lose the light? Oh, now we're going to have some cool air in here. Thank you. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. And so that's with Metasploit. We're able to streamline a lot of the work and get down to the nitty-gritty of we have a vulnerability, can we exploit it or can we not? As opposed to working with multiple, who knows where they came from, proof of concepts off of like exploit database or something that a lot of it's good, sometimes maybe not all of it is good. Something, it's really a way you can trust and just get right down to it and try and exploit these systems. So that's actually what we're going to do today. By the end of this class, we will have exploited 2 systems actually, a Windows and a Linux system with Metasploit. How many of you have ever exploited a system before? few of you already. Well, you're all going to be able to by the end of this class. Sounds kind of daunting, right? You're going to learn in the course of basically an hour how to exploit. Well, that's how easy Metasploit can make it. So let's look at MSF console. That's the Metasploit framework console for exploitation. I'm actually going to show you a demo of this one, but let's look at the slide. It shows stuff. So this is an example for exploitation. So basically this is everything you need to say in order to use an exploit. That's not too many lines, huh? So basically what we need to do is say use in our module, so whatever exploit we want to use, and then set our parameters, so set our IP addresses, set our payloads, and you can show your options, and then finally after all this you can say exploit and it sends it off, and hopefully it works. In our case it will work because I already know what works because I built the machines. Not always so lucky in a pen test. And all of this will be available online afterwards. There's actually a cheat sheet online for this already that I wrote from the last time I did this class. But don't feel like you have to write this all down because it will be back. In fact, there it is right there again. Except this time I have everything already filled in for you. So this is actually all the commands you would need to do to exploit our XP box. So at the top I'm saying search Windows SMB. So I can tell because I know, but we'll show next week how to find out your vulnerabilities that might be present on a system. But I know that I have Windows XP with an SMB vulnerability, so I search for Windows SMB. It will show me all the modules that pertain to Windows SMB exploits. I choose, oh, I have a pointer. Forgot about this. I choose the one I want, MSO8067.net API. If there was any vulnerability you ever wanted to discover ever, that would probably be the one, because everybody uses it in their demos because it's very, very stable. And that's the one we're going to use. So we just say info on it to make sure it's the one we want. That'll show us information about it. And then we decide we like it, that's the one we want. So we just say we use that module. Show payloads, that'll show our available payloads based on how much space it has and what it's compatible with. There's a bunch of payloads in Metasploit, probably at least 100, and not all of them will be available all the time. So it'll show you a list of everything we can choose. So I want to use Meterpreter, which we will see later. That's our special Metasploit payload for Windows that has lots of commands. So we want to use Windows Meterpreter reverse TCP, so that'll be a reverse connection back to us. Show options, that'll show all the options that some of them are already set, but some that we need to set. So an example of what we need to set, we want to set our local host to what we connect back to. So you would put that as your system, and you'll set the other options. I'm going to show this. And then you say exploit, and off it goes. So let's try and do this on this machine. So let's pull up our virtual machines. There they were. So I have Backtrack. I believe all of you have Backtrack as well. So in order to get to Metasploit on Backtrack, it'll come up as you're in your root folder. Current working directory is just /root, but it doesn't matter. So Backtrack is Linux, but it's got some extra stuff built in. It's basically just streamlined for pen testing. Basically, like for example, last week there was a new tool that I hadn't used before that I needed for a pen test I was doing. I'd never used it before, but just on a whim, I typed the command into Backtrack, and Backtrack already had it installed, so I didn't have to go about trying to find it or download it. Chances are, if it's a legitimate security tool, it's probably on here. As of Backtrack 5, it even already has Nessus pre-installed. So it's just like Linux, except there's this directory called pentest. Down, so I'm not move it. So it's pentest, and then exploits, and then framework 3. That's how we get to. Oops, I didn't say CD. That helps. Change directory. Everybody here a little familiar with Linux? Yeah, okay. So, and then once we're here, let's just show what's in here. Quite a few things here, but You can see like GUI's kind of still there, but it doesn't really work anymore. MSF console,
Yeah.
MSF a lot of things.
I only got up to framework 2 on this.
You only have the framework 2, there's no framework 3.
Right.
There's sometimes both. It's if you're using live CD though, MSF console's in the path, so
Yeah, just
Right, right, right.
console.
That's it.
Okay, so you guys are good? Okay. Okay, so then you just say MSF console. And then that'll take a minute to load because it loads up a custom screen every time. So each of you will have something different. Oh, I didn't get a cow. You can get a cow that says funny things to you, or in this case, it has ASCII art of the word metasploit. So each time it'll be something new.
I got a cow.
You got a cow? What does your cow say? Did it
It doesn't
say
say
anything?
funny though. It's just a cow.
MSF,
Yeah, sometimes they say things. Okay, so now we're in the MSF console, which we can still do everything we could do before. Like if I say ifconfig to look at our IP addresses, it still works. So you can still run any of your Linux commands. You just now have the option to use some more. Okay, so we're trying to exploit Windows XP, correct? We want to do an SMB vulnerability. So let's search. The way we know Metasploit is set up, we know that it'll be something in Windows and something in SMB. So let's search for Windows SMB. So it'll search all of the modules that are loaded, and it'll show everything. But there's quite a few SMB vulnerabilities here for us to go through. So this is everything that could be relevant. Luckily, I already know what's relevant. And it's in there somewhere. But anyways, I know we want to use MS-08067. So let's run info on it and see what Metasploit will tell us about it. So info, Windows, SMB, MS-08 underscore 067 underscore net API. Tells us description, references of where to go to get more information. It'll show us our options, show us what systems this works on. See, there's quite a few. So it'll show us all the systems that it can exploit with this. And since we want Windows XP Service Pack 2 English, we know that that's in here, it says so. But it does automatic targeting, so it should be able to figure out what our system is. Talks about who wrote it. H.D. Moore, HDM, he's actually the guy who first wrote the framework, and he's now Chief Security Officer at Rapid7. So, pretty cool guy, but we owe all this to him originally. And just some more information about it. So, based on that information, we think, yeah, this is the one we want to use. So, in order to use it, we say use, and then again, Windows, SMB, MS-08, 067. Net API. Is everybody who wants to follow along now able to? Okay. Because if you're having trouble following along or you just want to watch now, after we finish up with the slides, I'll be glad to go around. I'll leave the VMs up and you can do any amount of attacking that you want and I can help. So we use that and now we see, where did we lose? See that now it looks different because now we're inside that exploit. Now, okay. So let's just start out with showing what payloads we can use. Again, remember our payload is what we're going to do after we've exploited it. So running a command or getting a shell on the box. Let's see what all is available. Looks like a few things. Since this is a Windows one, it will only pick Windows payloads. And see, like here it says Windows add user. So that payload right there would just add, instead of giving us a session that we could interact with, it would just add a user for us and make that user an administrator so we could log into that box. Kind of something that if you're on a pen test, hopefully people would be auditing for that, like, oh, new users are coming up in our network, that's no good. So in some cases that's good, but Windows add user is actually quite a small payload comparatively to a shell, so sometimes that one comes in handy if you just don't have much room. But actually, we want to get a shell with Meterpreter so we can show it. So what we're actually going to use is a different one called Windows Meterpreter. So, how do we choose an option for payloads? What we're actually going to say is set. So, it's actually quite easy to remember this stuff because it's set payload. That's exactly what we want to do. Whereas ifconfig, sometimes, how does that? I know it means interface config, but really, set payload is somehow easier to remember, I think. So, the payload we actually want to use is Windows, and then Meterpreter. And then we want to use reverse TCP. So, a reverse shell kind of works like this. So my computer is the beer bottle, and the computer I've exploited is the microphone. So I send an exploit over to the microphone, and then the microphone calls back to me and sends a shell to me, and I'm listening here for the shell. Whereas a bind shell, in that case, I send an exploit, and then we just open a port with a shell over here, and then it's up to me to connect through. So when you think of like how firewalls are set up now, it won't let incoming connections to come in. So setting up a bind shell and then I try and connect to my shell, sometimes a firewall will often block that. A lot of times you would see it a lot more likely that you're able to just push out anything. There is egress filtering certainly, but if you send it out over like port 443, that looks like the internet. So it just comes on out and back to our attacker. So that's one reason you'd want to use a reverse shell. But bind shells too, and again, not everything shells. There's a lot of stuff going on up there, but this is just the example we're going to use. So it's going to call a reverse shell back to our attack box. And then let's look at our options. To see everything, show options. So we see everything. Some of it's already set. Let's look at everything we have here. Something called our host, which isn't set. That's our remote host. We definitely need to know that. If it's required, it'll say yes. Everything here is required. But our host is where we want to attack. No exploit can really get very far if it doesn't know where it needs to go. So we definitely need to set that.
.119.
Hmm?
This would be .119.
Let me check real quick. Windows XP Professional.
Oh, the IP address. She's in the target system.
This one is 122.
Oh, this one's okay.
Yeah, 192.168.10.122, and then the Linux one was, should really just write this on a whiteboard or something, is 119. So for this one, your last octet needs to be 122. Okay, Darren is going to write those on the whiteboard for everyone.
Which ones?
XP is 192.168. 10.122. And then Ubuntu, or just say Linux, Linux is fine, is 119 is the last octet. Alright, so for the rest of the class, anytime you want to attack one of those systems, feel free to do so, and those are the IP addresses. I do believe, just stop me if stuff starts to not respond. I believe the exploits we're using should be able to take that many sessions. That's how good they are. So that would be what we would set remote host to, is to the XP box. And then our port is already set. Since it's an SMB exploit, it wants to exploit SMB, so assuming they're not running SMB on a non-standard port, which in this case we are not, then we can just leave that alone. It knows where to go. And then down here we see our payload options. Again, we see lhost is not set yet. That's our local host. It needs to know where to connect back to. That would be us. That would be a good time to call ifconfig inside of our system. Yours will be different. You will need to know your IP address, or else it will try to connect back to me, which I won't have a listener, so it'll just confuse my system a little bit. So you'll actually want to call back to your own box. And lport is already set to 4444. Since we don't already have an exploit running, that will be fine. When we do our next exploit on a Linux system, we'll want to change that because that port will already be in use. But since this is our first one, we can go ahead and use it. So, and also in some cases, you might need to set up the exploit target. When we said info, well, let's just show target, shall we? This is also something you can do. Since here we see automatic targeting, this will actually check and see. It's kind of easy to do with SMB, since SMB basically says, hi, I'm so-and-so. But in some cases, you might not know exactly what the target is, or it might not be able to find out through automatic targeting, so you would actually have to set it. So you can say show targets. Again, it'll show all the systems it can attack. So we would want to set it, if we didn't use automatic targeting, which we will because it'll work, you would actually want to manually set it to XP Service Pack 2 English.
And I'm sorry, how do you set the R host, or is that what you're going to show?
And we're going to show that. The same way we set payload, we're just going to set our host. So basically it's set and then the parameter you want to set and then what you want to set it to. So whereas we said set payload and then the payload name, now we want to say set our host and then our XP machine over there, 192.168.10.122. Hope after I say that it's going to hold up that it doesn't just start dying on me. That's why everyone uses this in a demo, because it really will hold up to a lot. So we set the R host, and then that sets it for us. We also set our L host. I've forgotten what my IP address is. Luckily, I can still ask if I can spell it right. So ifconfig. Whoa, what did I just do? Oh, I said there was another line coming. So all my commands still work. So I'm 114. You guys will all need to find out who you are. And so we'll set our L host the same way. So we say set our parameter L host and then the value. So I will say 192.168.10.114. You will say your own address. And then have I forgotten anything? Let's show our options now. Now see, we see everything set to the values I said. So I can go through, is this what I want? And I say yes. Okay. So now what? Everything's ready. All I have to do is say exploit. And God help me if it should fail. Oh no. Did somebody already set it off?
I had this session for a while, and I couldn't get back in after. I assume a few other people probably have set.
Okay, so I guess the answer is that... Yeah. Let's see. There we go. So, you know. It helps if you spell it right. There's a glare over there. Says it's still running. So was anybody, you were able to get a session, did anybody else get a session on it?
I think Ryan said it's successful and then no sessions created. And then I tried it again and it just didn't accept it.
Let me reset it. Of course it's going to get a different IP address now. I should have taken a snapshot of it, but I guess, you know, hindsight and all. It's gonna have God knows what IP in that snapshot though. Yeah, that would be the house I used to live in, but I don't anymore. Is the pin ready then? I'm changing the IP. It's now 146 is the last octet, but nobody attack it. Let me get the demo to work. So I want to set my R host to the new one. Yeah, obviously it can't hold up. I think what I need to do though is have my set here and then have like a server for you guys to hit separately. So there we go. Now we see it doing some stuff. And so, let's see. So it says it started a reverse handler on our port. And then it's automatically detecting the target. It sees it's Windows XP Service Pack 2. So it uses that target and sets up its payload accordingly, and it triggers the vulnerability, and then now we have a session. So just like that.
The checkered flag here. Do this now. Or?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Well, no, wait. Let's not, because then you'll kill my session.
Sorry.
It should be able to take more than one. I've used it in a class before. You got one? Okay. Let's, for now, leave it alone so I can use this session when we show Meterpreter. But, so you all walked through it and saw that it would have worked, and then when we get to the exercises in the end, then you can all have at it, and I will reset it as many times as you want. In fact, let me go ahead and take a snapshot so I won't have to change the IP again. So, should have done it before. Oh well. We'll get to that when we get to that. So now we have a session in Meterpreter. And so now we can interact with that. And we're going to do one more exploit and then come back to this. So let's go ahead and background this. So we just say background, and now we're back in our Metasploit. But if we look, say sessions, and then -L for list, that'll show that session is still there. And to interact with it again, we say sessions -I, and then the number, we see its ID is 1, and then we're back in that session. So we can do multiple things, come back and go, and just leave them there for us for later. So let's go ahead and background that again, and look at doing this, just one more quick one on a Linux machine. Let's not do that right now. Okay. Linux exploitation. Well, let's read that slide at least, shall we? Okay. So you never really use the command line interface unless you're doing scripting. It's so much easier to use console. Everybody uses console, so any of your demos and tutorials you're going to see are going to be on console. But if you do want to do scripting, let's just cover it. So same way you run console, except it doesn't become a console, it just goes ahead and runs it. So you just say MSF command line interface, CLI, choose the exploit you want to use, set your options, in this case option equals X, so instead of rhost space and then the host, we would say rhost equals and then 192.168.10.146. So we set all our options like that, and then we say E for exploit, and so this is just how in one line, instead of setting things one by one, so you can see how this would work in a script really well. See, no interaction, just go ahead and do it. So an example is how we would do the exact same thing we just did. We would say command line interface, and then our exploit, Windows SMB, MS-08-067 Net API, and then set all of our options. Remember, some of them were already set for us, like the R port is 445 and our local port is 4444, so we don't have to specify those unless we want to change them. So we would set our host, which these IPs are from my old class, so they wouldn't even line up, but we set our host and L host, set our payload. In this case, you chose a bind shell, which again was the one where it just listens on a port for us, and then I would say E for exploit. And if we get lost, if we don't remember what the options were or what payloads are available, we can just ask it that. So instead of saying E, say I didn't know what payloads were available. So I got to here and I'm like, payload equals, I'm not sure. So this line wouldn't be here, and we would just put a P here, and when we hit enter, it would show us all the payloads. And also, if we didn't even get to here, if we just got to here and we knew what exploit we wanted to use, and we had no idea what options there were, we thought, well, of course there's going to be our host, but what else is available? We could just be right here and tack on an O, hit enter, and it'll show us all the options, the same way it did in the client. So you don't necessarily have to know what you're doing straight up if you want to use the interface here, but see, if you want a script, it's definitely what to use, but for everyday use of Metasploit, the console is where you want to go. But that slide will be there, it'll be in your cheat sheet, so if you ever want a script with Metasploit, here's how you do it. So let's do the same thing with a Linux machine real quick. It's all the same stuff really. So it's a completely different kind of machine. The shellcode would obviously be different. You wouldn't run commands the same way on Linux as you do on Windows, but as you look through here, this looks oddly similar to what we used before, except it's a different exploit, obviously, an exploit for Windows and Linux would be different. So we have an exploit here that's going to work on our Linux machine, but we show our payloads. Our payload's going to be different. This one is Linux instead of Windows, and we still show our options the same, and oddly enough the options we need to set are the same, and we still say exploit. So let's run that real fast. Again, finding the vulnerability is something we're going to cover next week in depth, starting from a blind pen test all the way to post-exploitation. But right now, just assume I know what I'm talking about. And say I already searched for what I needed to, because I'm actually already in it over here, and the one I was using this morning, oddly enough. So I've already said use the exploit I need. Let's go back up, it'll say. So use Unix miscellaneous, I guess, MISC, and then distcc_exec. And that's just a vulnerability that happens to be in our metasploitable box. So you can go ahead and say that if you want to, but again, I wouldn't go ahead and set it off. Let me get it in the video right at least once. And then afterwards, after I do this one, you can go ahead and attack it once I get the session, because I'm not going to use this one again. And then again, let's show our payloads. We're going to see, we don't see very many payloads here. I wonder why that is. We saw a lot more payloads before, so let's look at our info on this exploit. So again, we say info and then the exploit. And let's spell it correctly, Joda. So we see here the space on it is 1024. Let's see how much space is on our other one. Windows SMB MS08 067 net API. Oh, that's not what I wanted to say. I wanted to say info, not use. Well, it actually even has less space, so it's a mystery on to me why there's so few payloads for that one. Thought it would be because there was less space, but that's actually not true. Okay, so we saw, let's show it again. We don't have as many options. There are more payloads available for Linux than that, but that's just all the ones that are compatible with this particular exploit, so we don't really have that many here. But we have, let's just use this one. This is command. No, let's use this one. Let's use the reverse one. So here's this command Unix reverse. That's a reverse shell. It's not going to be interpreted, it's just going to be a straight up shell. But let's use that one. We know about reverse things. Let's use that. Use command Unix reverse. And then we show our options again. Oops. Why did I say use? You guys are making me nervous, clearly. What did I do wrong here when I said use? What should I have said instead? If I want to set my payload. Right, I want to say set payload. And that will work normally. And now we can show options. And then everything looks the way it should. It has stuff already in it from this morning. So, see, it's already got options in there, but these aren't the options we need. See, .1, .4, and .1.5, those aren't what we need at all. Right. So we want to set our host to our Linux machine over there, 192.168.10.119. And again, I've forgotten what is my IP, 114. So again, your own IP for our L host for it to connect back to. And then, if you already have a session, remember when you saw show options, see I have, because I had already messed with this, it says 4344 here for our L port. You probably still have it as 4444. If you have a session already, you've already used that port, and it'll have trouble binding to it. So what you actually want to use is to change that. So you would say set L port, and then just really type in anything that isn't a common port. So I used 4344. So since I haven't used that one yet, it can use that one. And then So then everything's already set. This one also uses automatic targeting. So let's set that off. It says a bunch of things, and now I have a command session. This one isn't as pretty because it's not Meterpreter, but if I say like cat Etsy password, cool. Actually, I would not be able to see Etsy's shadow because who am I? I'm actually not root. I exploited something that was running as a daemon, so I'm not actually root on this system. So I would need to do something to
Elevate.
yeah, exactly. I would need to elevate my privileges on this one if I wanted to be root. But actually, oh, my session died on my other one. Oh no. So you guys can go ahead and do that one to your heart's content. I'm done with it. So I lost my session here. Let's see if I can get it back. Connection was refused. Okay, this time I'll be smart about it and make the snapshot right after I do it. My VMs are not holding up as well as I had hoped. I will try and fix that before next week. Alright, now I want to get it in IP and then immediately take a snapshot so I can just reset it over and over for you. Okay, 146. Okay, got the same IP. Cool. You grab a snapshot of that so I can just revert back to it if it falls again, which is, for some odd reason, I seem to think it might. Okay, so now I have a snapshot of that. So we should be good for exercises now. Let me get a session again. There, okay. Alright, so now I'm back where I was. I have a session on that machine. So let's talk about Meterpreter, shall we? What is this strange thing called Meterpreter, and why is it better than just a regular shell? Meterpreter. Okay, so we've already gained a session using a Meterpreter payload. Whereas we saw with the Linux one, we just used a regular command shell, and we had commands. We were able to say cat Etsy password the same way we would if we were sitting there on the console. Same way here with Meterpreter, we can still do all the same things. In fact, we can just say the word shell and it'll drop us straight into a regular Windows shell. So we can still do all the things we did before, but we have some extra functionality. We'll look at some of it. It's all memory based. This never actually hits the disk. So as soon as the computer turns off, there's no memory of this whatsoever. So it's all going to be residing in memory. So for forensics reasons, Meterpreter is pretty cool. How it actually does this remains a mystery onto me. I just realized there's a chair on the ceiling. Okay, sorry for the jump in the middle of the video. I'm like, what? There's a chair over there. So again, it's everything a shell can do, plus some extra. So here's an example of a few Meterpreter commands. If you say help, it'll show you all the commands. So really this slide should have just say help, but we'll go over a couple more. We already saw me use the background command to background a session if I wanted to do something else. PS will show all our processes. Really, the way I think of Meterpreter on the whole is, you know, how if you want to say, find out your IP on Windows, you say ipconfig. But if you're in Meterpreter, you say ifconfig. So really, you can think of Meterpreter as a way to use Linux commands on Windows. Plus, it has some, like for example, there is no, as far as I am aware, no Linux command called migrate. So it has extra functionality as well. So, say you exploited something and you exploited someone's browser, like a client-side vulnerability. You see this all the time, right? If you open an email attachment that's bad, then it exploits your browser and gets basically a session in a way on your system. But then if you close the browser, then the session will die, right? Because it's running inside the browser. But migrate, this is exactly what happens in Meterpreter client or Metasploit client-side attacks. It just immediately migrates into something else, like the logon process or some other process that you're not likely to close. Because if you see your browser hanging, you're probably just going to close it. So you would migrate and then go to a process ID. So you say PS to see all your processes. So you see that like iExplorer.exe, which is your start menu and stuff. So that's probably not going to go away. So I would say migrate into whatever process ID that was. So it moves Meterpreter out of the memory space of, say, Internet Explorer and into the memory space of the start menu, basically. That came out weird in the slide. So yeah, it moves Meterpreter to another process, not another bullet. And get UID shows the user you are. We said who am I in our Linux command shell, and we saw that we were daemon. And so if we get UID in our Meterpreter and we don't see that we're system or at least administrator, we might want to escalate our privileges. The good thing is in Meterpreter, instead of like having to upload a local privilege escalation, it actually will do it for you. All you have to say is get system and it will try everything it knows to elevate you. It has a few techniques, but really the common ones you would see on Windows are things you would upload in order to use. It will just do it for you. So yeah, if you exploit like a browser, if you do browser and then you're running as the browser, right? So you're not system quite yet. Or if you do a web server and then you're the web server, you can just say get system and chances are you'll be system pretty soon. A few more download files. This is really good. You have to like browse to something and then put up a web server on your side. It can be kind of difficult if any of you have experience with this. So you can just download any file off the remote system to our system. Also, we can upload any file from our system onto the remote system. That's kind of nice. Hash dump will dump the hashes from the SAM. So no, you do not have to upload your SAM dump and put all these weird tools on your system and try and break into it. You just say hash dump, and if you have the correct privileges, then yes, you will be able to dump all the hashes. And again, shell, if you're not really that good with Meterpreter yet, or you just want to do something that's in the regular Windows shell, just say shell, and then when you're done, say exit, and it drops you right back into Meterpreter. So we're done. Alright, let's look at Meterpreter for a bit. Where are my VMs? There they are. Has somebody been exploiting my systems? I lost my system again. I've never seen it drop like this before. I will fix it before next week. See, I can't even blame it on the faulty internet because we're not connected to it. I mean, like, oh, it's the hurricane. The hurricane did it, but obviously it's not the hurricane. I have no good excuse as to why I'm losing my sessions.
Electromagnetic juju.
Yeah, it's. I could see that around here. I mean, the chair is the chair.
The chairs actually represent my dead friends, so that could be.
Oh yeah, it's like seance.
Yeah. You will not have sessions that last in your Metasploit class.
No, I think you had a good idea when this first happened. Just set up a system off to the side.
So that's what we'll do. We'll bring the server in next week. I didn't want to bring it out in the rain, so it might be my little laptop. So now we have yet another session. And so now we're in Meterpreter. So first thing, always say help. That shows me everything I can do. Let's look at some of this. A lot of things we can do here. So just some basic things. Like we see migrate here. We saw that one, migrate into another process. All sorts of things here. Exit will terminate the session. Then here's kind of our Linux commands in here. So you can, like ls to list all the files, make directories. So I think, just in my experience, I would say it may be a personal preference more than anything else. It's easier to work with the file system in Linux than it is in Windows, and now you're able to use those same commands. And again, you've got your upload and your download, which makes it really easy to get stuff to and from. And then things here like PS, shell, shut down the system. That's always fun. Sometimes I just give up. Just die. Go away. sysinfo information about the system for post-exploitation. You'd want to gain as much information as possible. So we'll look at it more next week about, here we are in a pen test, we've exploited a system, what can we learn from it? But basically here that we are inside of the system, that's our main goal now, is to learn as much information about it, see where else we can get from it. Like, for example, maybe it has another interface, like I got to it from this local network, maybe it's connected to another network that through this system I can now go try and attack that I didn't have access to before. So we can check that out. And this is actually some fun stuff. You can get keystrokes from them. So a good way to get passwords is actually put your, when you migrate into the logon. So the only keystrokes you'll actually get that'll be in that memory space will be people logging into the machine. So your entire key scan dump is if they logged in, you'll get just their password, whereas you'd get everything if you were in like the start menu. But that's cool. So you can also do screenshots. A lot of things. When you have your own interpretive session, that's actually part of the exercise, is to just see what's there. There's also some stuff with webcams. If they have a webcam on that system, you can look at it and then, you know, tell it to take a picture, see who's there. Or, you know, if something's behind them, like if they have a whiteboard with all the IPs of their system, or maybe some passwords right behind there. It's amazing, this stuff. And back to basically the beginning, a lot of this, like H.D. Moore started the framework, but there's lots of people who've worked on this, so like probably a different person wrote each one of these. Somebody thought, you know, it would be kind of fun to turn on somebody's microphone and listen to it. So somebody else wrote that. So if there's something cool you want to see this do that it doesn't already do already, learn a little bit of Ruby. We're not actually going to cover it in this 2-week course, but I did 7 weeks of Metasploit once, and we did cover writing exploits then. So it's actually not a hard process to move into. I'd say it was a lot harder to learn like C than it was to learn how to write exploits in Metasploit. Here's Git system again. We'll actually look at that one. I believe we're already system, but we'll look at it because it's so interesting. And then hash dump. Again, time stomp is a fun one if you're, again, trying to be stealthy, because if we're talking to files, we can have access times and such on them. Time stomp, you can actually set the mace attributes to whatever you want, or to set them to 0. That makes it kind of more forensically sound. If everything on the entire file system says it basically was last processed in 1985 or something, you know, an untrained forensic investigator would not be able to make heads or tails of this. My session died again! One more time, shall we? I don't know how you guys are going to do the exercises with this. I guess we will just restart it over and over and over again. Why is it off this?
We can bring in a real Windows XP.
Yeah. Well, it would have to be one that was unpatched.
Well,
I'm sure we could find one around here. Okay. One more time, just a little bit more, because I want to look at Git system. No, I don't want to say help. I want to say exploit. Okay, so let's look at Git system. I believe -H. Yeah, this shows all the techniques. So this is just all the techniques. Let's use it.
defaults to 0, all techniques.
Yeah, so it'll just try all these techniques it knows. These are 4 techniques it knows. The kill trap, that's like one you see people uploading a lot if they don't use this. So, I mean, I've seen it fail, but generally when I see it fail, it's like in a capture the flag where they've specifically set it not to work. So you can just say git system if you're not system, but we actually already are system, I believe. Yes, we're already system, so that means we can say hash dump. And I believe the password on this box is in fact password, so we now have our hashes, and look, lmhash was actually turned on by default in XP, so it would be really easy to run these through a rainbow table. But yeah, I'm pretty sure the password on this box is password. But yeah, so I guess that's all I have for today. Actually, let's just run through the rest of the slides so you can see my contact information and stuff. Okay, I just opened Firefox. Would really help if it fit. There we go. Okay. So your exercises, we're gonna have to hit the snapshot button a lot on that Windows machine apparently, but on either the Windows or the Linux machine, or both, as it suits your fancy. Again, the IPs are up there. Let me know when the sessions start dying on this, and we'll hit the snapshot on the Windows box. Run through what we did today. If you have any questions or need a reminder on what you want to say for any command, I will be here as long as you need me, and we can work through this and experiment. You don't necessarily have to use the same payloads I did. If it's a payload, if you say show payloads, any of those payloads you want to use, see what you can come up with. And if you get a interpreter session, say help and see what commands you see there. And like some of them probably wouldn't work since the webcam, this one doesn't even have a webcam, but so you might not be able to do everything, but look at those commands locally and see what looks fun and try and do them. So next week's agenda, what are we going to do if you actually come back? One, we're going to have VMs that work. We're going to use metasploit in a simulated penetration test. So I'm going to bring in a lot more VMs, not just these two. And I'm not going to tell you anything about them. And what we're going to do is we're going to work together to use metasploit for each stage of like a penetration test. So this would be like what I do for work. They're like, okay, here's your IP range, have at it. And that's all I know. So we're going to gather some information about the systems, try and figure out what's on the network, what's running on it, like what open ports there are, so what software I could potentially try and exploit, what operating systems we think they're running. We'll do some vulnerability scanning from inside Metasploit. We'll actually have it attached directly to Nessus, a vulnerability scanner, and put it into a Metasploit database based on what it finds. So we'll scan our systems and see if we can find some vulnerabilities we might want to use. So then we'll do some more exploitation like we did today, but more in depth about how to go from vulnerability finding to hunt for the vulnerability to choose what exploit we want to use. And then post-exploitation, we kind of touched on that today by looking at Meterpreter, but we'll talk about, what would actually be useful in a pen test. Like saying sysinfo to find information about the system. Finding out the user's hash dump, of course, try to get passwords if the same users are on multiple systems. That would probably be good. And every penetration tester's least favorite thing in the world, reporting. A penetration test is no good unless we can tell our clients exactly what we did, what worked, and how they can remediate their risks. So how can Metasploit also help us streamline that? So we're just going to do this all with Metasploit, see how it helps us to streamline these tasks, and then we're going to hack some stuff. And you're going to pop my boxes, and Darren made me put in this slide. With your Metasploit foo, what did you think I meant? See, they kind of laughed.
That's all I asked for.
See, I had it all in one slide, except I didn't have, like, what did you think I meant? And he said, you gotta put it on a different slide. Make it sound dirty or something. And so, contact me. I'm Georgia. My website is germnoobs.com or georgiaviteman.com, which actually goes to germnoobs.com right now. And I'm Georgia at germnoobs.com for email, and on Twitter I'm Vincent Cadmon. So I will leave that up. Or I'm on the DC 401 mailing list, so if you need to get a hold of me. But if you have any questions about the class, definitely reach out to me. I'm hoping to teach this course. Well, I'm not saying hoping. I'm going to teach this course at an actual conference in November. So if you have any feedback on it, aside from getting VMs that work, I'd definitely love to hear it, because I need to have it actually be solid by then. So that's all for today.